Welcome back to the channel. My name is Matthias. Today we're going to talk about H.R. McMaster's book, Battlegrounds. And we have covered this book before. He was the National Security Advisor to Donald Trump during 2017 to 2018. It's a fascinating book to see how things were back during his first term compared to his second term nowadays. And we're going to focus on the situation between the United States and Russia. So actually the book starts off with this first encounter between H.R. McMaster and his analog in the Russian government. His name was Nikolai Patrushev. I hope I didn't butcher his last name, but he was the Secretary of Security for the Russian Federation. Let me see here, from 2008 to 2024. So the main part of this book is really to focus on McMaster trying to understand why we had like this level of aggression from Russia during that time, which was pretty much hell-bent on undermining American power across the world, especially their soft power. Also, the whole situation with the new generation of Russian warfare, which was very destabilizing for especially local politics within the United States. Russia really learned how to use cyber attacks on one level and also to manipulate populations through social media. So we have like this very large spectrum from attacking infrastructure through the internet, through computers, and they use the example of the electric grid in Ukraine, all the way into meddling into the US elections via social media, really like sparking this division within American society. Now, through my personal point of view, I feel like, for example, Russians have been very able into taking advantage of the echo chambers that social media creates and just throwing fuel onto the fire there. Now, it's an interesting detail because we're talking about H.R. McMaster, who was part of Trump's government, talking about Russian meddling in the elections. Like he's like recognizing it. Also, McMaster really dives into the whole situation where Russia really wanted to show off its influence across the world. He uses the example of Syria, that they viewed how things turned out during the Syrian civil war was in Russia's favor and it was a success for them. There, McMaster cites Valery Gerasimov. Again, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. But the thing is that what McMaster wanted to touch with Nikolai was, like, for example, with the situation with Syria, is that sooner or later, Russian forces were going to enter into combat with American forces. There had been already a minor spat between American forces that were training local militias and the Wagner Group, which it's very interesting, at least at this moment in the book, McMaster doesn't recognize this mercenary group by name. Like, he talks about Prigozhin, who was the leader of the group, but not of. And in these first encounters between McMaster and Nikolai, he really wanted to offer his counterpart possibly an off-ramp from the Ukrainian conflict and from Syria to be able to ease sanctions with this and to start to normalize the relationship between Russia and the United States. McMaster does mention that during this whole time, he considered Sergei Lavrov as like an impediment to any type of thawing of this bad relationship that we had between Russia and the US. That Lavrov was very, very suspicious from any type of initiative that would come from the West. Then McMaster starts to explain a little bit about Nikolai's past, that he had a career in Russian intelligence, just like Vladimir Putin, that he had cut his teeth in the KGB, and then when we had the fall of the Soviet Union and we had the birth of the Russian Federation, we had the FSB. He was the head of that from 1999 to 2008. And McMaster starts talking about how all these guys that came from the world of intelligence, from Russian intelligence, had like this very strong patriotic zeal to them. They viewed themselves as like the ultimate patriots. Now, it's fascinating, Nikolai's point of view on key issues of what was going down in the international relations of that time. First, Crimea was a defensive maneuver for Russia, that the growth of NATO was a major sticking point for Russia, and to the point that it felt like a menace to Russian survival. that American policy in the Middle East was actually a risk for the whole world and that fueled terrorism, that America's actions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya were very ill conceived. While for McMaster's, the position for the US was first and foremost to stop any possible open conflict between Russia and the US, and then that the US was not going to stay compliant every time Russia would overextend themselves. And another big thing, obviously, with relative to the new generation Russian warfare, basically just to chill out. And like this whole situation, it's fascinating when you see it in the book. Now, something that I found fascinating in this part of the book is how McMaster's goes into the whole fact that sanctions on Russia was a bipartisan thing. That this weird sympathy that you have for parts of the Republican Party towards Russia, that's a pretty new thing, like even within Trump's administration. So we're gonna leave this video here. I hope you guys liked it. See you guys next time. Bye.